We've got Aston Villa against Man United, 2 o'clock televised kickoff at Villa Park. Man United have got a trip to Porto today, so that's something to sort of keep an eye on. And because of that, I think there's no sort of official plays yet. I think if Man United are to sort of receive a bit of injury news, it could change a lot. So we'll keep this section sort of a bit light, keep it sort of lean, but um, there is a lot to consider for both teams. So Aston Villa were held to a 2-2 draw against Ipswich on the weekend. Thought they were really underwhelming in that game, sort of defensively getting bypassed way too easily. But they bounced back fantastically against Bayern Munich midweek, beat them 1-0, and that should fill them with a ton of confidence going into this one. It's worth noting, however, that there was quite a lot of injury news to pick apart. So we had Jacob Ramsey withdrawn with injury, and Leon Bailey withdrawn for injury, and same for Onana. So those three come in as doubts for this game, and I think that changes a lot. If all three are to be ruled out, obviously Villa will be a completely different side that we've seen so far. So again, something to consider. For Man United, they were obviously dealt a damning defeat at Old Trafford, 3-0 to Spurs, in which Bruno Fernandes was sent off, but that red card has been rescinded, so he'll be available for this game. As I say, they've got the trip to Porto today, so one to keep an eye on. But in terms of the injury report, we've got Mainu who will probably miss out with this with a hamstring injury. So you sort of imagine a midfield pivot of Ugarte and Eriksen is in line to start on the weekend, barring any changes. Again, as I say, keeping it very light. But assuming Ugarte starts, I really like his foul prices. I think it's sort of quite an easy play at the moment, given how he plays. But I still think that there is value in his prices. He's currently 1.6 with Paddy to commit 2 fouls, I believe. Obviously too short, but if we're looking at the sort of players he matches up against, I think most notably it will be Morgan Rogers, um, who is a player who is very, very strong in his duels. He's a strong carrier of the ball, and he will occupy a very similar zone to Ugarte. If we just have a look a bit more into Ugarte, we can see in his first start he made 6 fouls against Barnsley, 1 foul against FC Twente in the Europa League, and then 3 fouls against Spurs. Um, Obviously, he's a player who likes to duel. He's very aggressive in his duels, often a bit too over eager to win the ball. And it was the sort of same story at PSG. He had 2.1 fouls per 90 in League One last season, 2.45 fouls in the season before. And if you think about the team he's playing in, it's a PSG side who's obviously see a lot of the ball, extremely dominant in the League One. So it's been a chain for him in the Premier League. I think he gets in a lot more duels. And because of that, if he's sort of given the same prices for fouls as he was at PSG, he's not playing in the same team. Obviously, Man United they control the ball a lot less. Naturally, that will lead to a lot more draws, fouls in midfield. So I do expect his sort of prices, even though they are already quite short, I think they will shorten even more as the season wears on. So it's sort of the right time to sort of take advantage of that now. If we look into Morgan Rogers, who is the sort of main target here in terms of the matchup, he's drawn a foul in 7 out of 8 games. As I say, he's a very strong carrier of the ball, and I think it's going to be a really good battle actually between him and Ugarte, two players who are very, very aggressive. So I really like that. And what you can actually do is Ugarte 2 fouls and Rogers to be fouled just one time comes out at 1.83 with Paddy Power, which again thinks that's a really nice price. Next angle I've got is to take advantage of the Villa high line, and it's for Marcus Rashford to be caught offside. He's currently priced at 1.67 with Sky, which is obviously on the shorter end, but I would say even that price holds some great value. If we look into his data this season, he's been caught offside the most times for Man United, 6 times this season already, um, including each of his last 3 starts. So already that's something to keep in mind. if we look into the sort of fixtures, he had two offsides against Brighton, one offside against Spurs. And when you sort of consider that Brighton play an equally high line as Villa, same for Spurs, that looked really good actually. That's a really, really good sign. Looking into the previous head-to-head data between these two, he was caught offside twice at Villa Park and once at Old Trafford. So the data really, really sort of points to at least one offside for him with ladder potential based on the fact that he was caught twice offside against Villa last season and twice against Brighton in 60 minutes, who play a similar sort of approach in terms of keeping a very, very high line. Um, that's that's the sort of main angles for me, just those two. But I have got a few leads to consider. So obviously with Bailey and Jacob Ramsey out, that likely provides Philogene with a start. He started against Bayern on the right, and then when Ramsey came off, he moved over to the left, and then when Bailey went off, he moved back over to the right. So sort of a bit uncertain where he plays. But one thing that is for certain is he's a very, very good player at drawing contact, drawing fouls. In a similar vein to Morgan Rogers, but Philogene is sort of more, he's more willing to go down and buy the free kick, whereas Rogers would sort of prefer to carry on. He's a bit more stronger with the duels. If he starts on the left, he'll be up against Mazraoui. If he starts on the right, he'll be up against Dallo, who I think are two very good players to target fouls this season, as we've seen sort of Man United play a bit more aggressive in their approach, a bit more aggressive with their press. Dallo and Mazraoui have been good targets for fouls. Um, if we just look into their data, we can see Mazraoui made 2,000 his last game against Spurs, averaging 1.42 fouls per 90 since making the move to Man United. And Dallo slightly above him. Obviously, we've seen he's blanked in games against Palace and FC20 and Barnsley, but Man United were very, very dominant in those games, and that won't necessarily be the case against Aston Villa. I think we'll see a more even split of possession. And again, if he draws the match with Philogene, it's an ideal one for making fouls. We've seen Dallo against Southampton, who really struggled against Tyler Dibling, who is quite similar in the sense that he is aggressive in taking on his man. He'll sort of look to get 1v1, whereas Dallo didn't really have that against any of the teams he blanked against. So Dallo, if he is to be up against Philogene, I like his prices, but again, we'll have to wait for lineups or a bit more certainty on lineups. So that'll be it for the Man United game. The final